You were told a beautiful lie. They said the marches worked. They said the laws changed. They said Jim Crow died somewhere between Selma and the signing of the Civil Rights Act. But what if that monster never died at all? What if it simply learned to hide? Today, the enemy doesn't wear white robes or carry burning crosses. It doesn't need to. It lives inside code, inside data, inside the invisible architecture of a digital America that decides your fate before you ever walk through a courtroom door. This is the story they don't want you to know. This is the truth about America's newest form of discrimination, one that hides in plain sight. In 1964, America made a promise. The Civil Rights Act was supposed to end an era of legalized hatred. Black Americans had fought, bled, and died for this moment. The moment when the law would finally see them as equal. For a brief, shining period, it seemed like progress was real. Segregated fountains disappeared, voting rights expanded. A new generation dared to dream of a country that judged them by character, not color. But beneath the surface, something else was happening. The architects of the old system were already planning their next move. The civil rights movement forced racism underground, but it never forced it out. What emerged in its place was something far more sophisticated. By the 2010s, America had entered the age of algorithmic decision-making. Courts adopted software to predict criminal behavior. Banks deployed AI to approve loans. Hospitals used machine learning to allocate care. All of it promised to remove human bias from the equation. All of it claimed to be neutral, objective, fair. But neutrality, it turns out, was the greatest lie of all. In 2016, a groundbreaking investigation exposed what many had long suspected. The investigative journalists at ProPublica examined a tool called COMPAS, a proprietary algorithm used in courtrooms across America to predict whether a defendant would commit future crimes. What they found was devastating. The algorithm labeled black defendants as high-risk future criminals at nearly twice the rate of white defendants, even when their actual criminal histories were similar or less severe. But here's what made it truly sinister. When researchers followed up years later, they discovered the algorithm was wrong. Black defendants labeled high risk often never reoffended. White defendants labeled low risk often did. The machine wasn't predicting crime. It was predicting race. Meet Marcus. In 2018, Marcus faced sentencing for a non-violent drug offense, his first adult charge. The COMPAS algorithm scored him as high risk for future violence. The judge, trusting the machine's objectivity, denied bail and recommended an extended sentence. Marcus spent 11 months in pretrial detention. He lost his job. He nearly lost his family. They told me a computer said I was dangerous, Marcus recalls, his voice steady but wounded. I'd never hurt anyone in my life. But that number, that score, it followed me everywhere. When researchers later reviewed his case, they found Marcus should have been classified low risk. The algorithm had simply inherited a different set of assumptions. Assumptions built on centuries of American inequality. To understand how the algorithm learned to discriminate, you have to understand what it was taught. Machine learning systems don't create knowledge from nothing. They learn from data, historical data. And American history is not neutral. The algorithm asks where you live. It asks about your family's income. It asks if your relatives have been incarcerated. Each of these questions carries the weight of redlining, of job discrimination, of mass incarceration policies that disproportionately targeted black communities for decades. The machine doesn't see a person. It sees a pattern shaped by the very injustice it claims to transcend. Perhaps the most damning evidence of all comes not from the algorithms themselves, but from the humans who use them. A comprehensive study of Virginia's criminal justice system revealed a troubling pattern. When AI recommended lighter sentences for low-risk defendants, judges frequently accepted those recommendations, but only for white defendants. When the defendant was black, judges were significantly more likely to reject the algorithm's leniency and impose harsher sentences. The result? Black Americans with identical risk scores received jail terms averaging 30 days longer than their white counterparts. The technology gave them a chance to choose fairness. They chose something else. The courtroom is only the beginning. Facial recognition technology has spread across American law enforcement like a digital wildfire. Police departments in cities from New York to Los Angeles deploy systems that scan faces in real time, matching them against databases of suspects. But these systems have a fatal flaw. Studies from MIT and the National Institute of Standards and Technology have confirmed what communities have experienced firsthand. Facial recognition algorithms misidentify black faces at rates up to 100 times higher than white faces. The Innocence Project has documented case after case of wrongful arrests. Innocent black men and women detained because a machine couldn't tell them apart from someone else. Their only crime was having a face the technology was never designed to see. In January 2020, Robert Williams was arrested in front of his wife and daughters on his front lawn in Farmington Hills, Michigan. The charge: shoplifting watches from a store. The evidence: a facial recognition match. But when detectives showed Williams the surveillance photo, even they could see the truth. "This is not me," Williams told them. "I hope you don't think all black people look alike." The algorithm had made a mistake. A mistake that cost Williams 30 hours in detention, immeasurable stress on his family, and the humiliation of being accused of a crime he didn't commit. The Detroit Police Department later admitted the technology was flawed. But for Robert Williams and countless others, the damage was already done. The discrimination doesn't stop at policing. It reaches into the very foundation of American economic life. AI-powered lending algorithms now determine who gets a mortgage, who qualifies for a small business loan, who can build generational wealth. A 2022 study examined 17 major mortgage lenders and found a consistent pattern. Black applicants were denied at significantly higher rates than white applicants with similar financial profiles. The algorithms learned from decades of discriminatory lending practices, from the redlining that starved black neighborhoods of investment for generations. Now that same bias is encoded into software that makes decisions in milliseconds. Decisions that determine whether a family can buy a home or build a future. The digital redline is invisible, but its effects are devastatingly real. Perhaps nowhere is algorithmic bias more consequential than in healthcare, where decisions can mean the difference between life and death. In 2019, researchers examined an algorithm used by hospitals and insurance companies across America to identify patients who would benefit from extra care. What they discovered was chilling. The algorithm systematically assigned black patients lower priority than white patients with identical medical needs. The reason? The software used healthcare spending as a proxy for health needs. But because black Americans have historically faced barriers to accessing healthcare, they spent less, not because they were healthier, but because the system had failed them. The algorithm interpreted a legacy of medical neglect as evidence that black patients needed less care. The circle of injustice continued. Who built these systems? Who profits from them? And why do they remain largely unaccountable? The companies behind tools like COMPAS operate with minimal oversight. Their algorithms are protected as trade secrets, shielded from the very defendants whose lives they determine. When civil rights advocates have demanded transparency, they've been met with walls of legal protection and claims of proprietary information. Billions of dollars flow between the tech industry and Washington, ensuring that regulations remain weak and accountability remains elusive. The engineers who build these systems are rarely malicious. Most believe in the neutrality of code. But intent doesn't matter when the outcome is injustice. But this is not a story without heroes. Computer scientist Joy Buolamwini founded the Algorithmic Justice League, using her research to expose how AI systems fail communities of color. Across the country, activists are demanding bans on facial recognition technology. Cities like San Francisco, Boston, and Portland have already prohibited police use of these systems. Civil rights organizations are pushing for algorithmic transparency laws that would force companies to reveal how their systems make decisions. And a new generation of technologists, many from the very communities most affected, are building alternatives, systems designed with equity at their core. The fight is far from over, but for the first time, the invisible enemy is being dragged into the light. Our ancestors faced an enemy they could see. They could point to the segregated fountain, the courthouse steps where justice was denied, the sheriff who enforced oppression with a badge. Today's battlefield is different, but the war is the same. The algorithm is not a neutral judge. It is a mirror, reflecting every injustice that came before, amplified and automated at a scale our grandparents could never have imagined. But here is what the architects of this system failed to understand. Black Americans have never been defeated by the systems built to contain them. From slavery to segregation, from redlining to mass incarceration, every generation has found a way to resist, to expose, to transform. This generation will be no different. The digital Jim Crow is real, but so is the movement rising to defeat it. We demand transparency from the machines that judge us. We demand accountability from the corporations that profit from bias. We demand justice from a system that promised neutrality and delivered discrimination. Our ancestors could not have imagined this fight. But they gave us the blueprint for victory, exposed the lie, organized the resistance, and never stop pushing until the chains are broken. The question is no longer whether these systems are unjust. The evidence is overwhelming. The question now is what we will do about it.